my headphone thing. Just one moment, y'all. Changing to my good ears for this. Alrighty. Let me get this shared out. Good morning. If you are joining me live this morning, we're going to be talking to Deborah Grace, the author of Crucifying the Bible, and hopefully she'll be here any minute. If you would like to come up on the panel this morning and talk to Deborah, please feel free to send a guest request. We are speaking about her book, though. Trying not to just talk about anything today. We want to talk about her book. Hi, Light Augusta. Hi, Dana. How are you? So please feel free to request that. And once she gets here, we'll get going. There's Deborah. And I'd love to have some of you up here with me. I do have questions. I always come prepared. But I'd love to have some of you come up here too. Let me fix my screen here. Hey,
Good
Deborah,
morning.
how are you today?
Doing well. I'll be turning on my camera in a few.
Okay, that's fine. Benny, DC, anybody want to come up and join us and talk with Deborah? I love having more people up here. So Dana, anybody who wants to come up, please feel free. Keep liking and sharing out the live. It really helps us. Also, I have a gift goal of the puppy hearts. They're only 1 coin each. If you can help that with that, it does push the live out there as well. So anything we can do to get to the magic algorithm. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Tracy. I'm sorry. Don't thank you, Tracy. No, I'm just kidding. Tracy, come up and hang out with us. She says she doesn't like it when I thank her. She doesn't want me to see what she's gifting me. And I forgot.
Only if you thank me.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, y'all, for the hearts. I appreciate you so much. Yeah, Asta, I just kind of shortened your name there, so I don't know, but I'm glad you're okay with it. I shortened everybody's names.
So what are we doing today? Do we have a specific chapter?
I do.
You just want to go over it broadly?
I'm going to ask you questions, and if other people want to come up and ask you questions, they are free to do. But I have an interview thing here for you, so we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. So I know that when I left and deconstructed, I had a grieving process. You know, it was, I don't think we talk about that enough as a community. And it's something we really should help those who are newly deconstructing, not destructing, help them with that, because for me, it was hard. I didn't have this community yet. So I felt very lonely in my grieving. But we also talk about RTS. And you talk about that pretty early on in your book. Do you remember some of the first signs that you were having that?
Yeah, so probably the one that stuck out the most was this feeling of like I couldn't catch my breath. My heart didn't feel like it was beating right. Vertigo was a big one.
Hang on one second, Deborah. Let me tell people what RTS is. It's religious trauma syndrome. I'm sorry, I should have said that. Go on.
Yeah, no,
I'm sorry.
so
They didn't know what I was talking about in the chat.
that's all right. No, it was just this like I couldn't catch my breath. I was like, where is this? And I knew where it was coming from, but I didn't at the same time. I don't know if that makes any sense. I was like, this can't be real.
Yeah.
But because my whole identity had been wrapped up in this belief system, everything else just kind of fell apart. Like the panic attacks, the nightmares, it all just, I don't know how to explain it.
No.
But other people have told me that, you were literally having symptoms of religious trauma.
Absolutely. Tracy, did you have any religious trauma when you were deconstructing?
Oh, I'm sure I did. But I deconstructed over such a long period of time that I'm not really sure which spot to point out and be like, oh yeah, that was traumatic. Oh yeah, that was traumatic.
Yeah.
So the big catalyst to kind of force my hand toward deconstruction, I worked at a residential treatment facility for teenagers, and a few of them jumped me, and I was injured. I herniated like the bottom 3 discs in my back. And the church that I was leading worship at brought in like specialty healing ministers. And when I didn't get healed, it turned on me kind of like, oh, well, she must be hiding some secret sin. And I eventually left because I could not effectively lead worship with a pastor who thought that I was openly sinning, and my lack of healing was proof of that. So I eventually left with the intention to find another church, but was really too depressed to try. So I spent the better part of the next 3 years reading anything I could get my hands on about intercessory prayer and healing and what the Bible says about the promises of God. And 3 read-throughs of the Bible and a couple dozen books later, I was just decimated. Like I was numb, and was numb for several years. So I guess instead of having more of like an outward episode of religious trauma all at once, it was the days on my face fasting and praying, and then realizing all of the things that I had done to appease a fairy tale god just sort of left me numb for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I can understand that. To answer a few questions in the chat, Jason says, what is religious trauma? Is it from a false theology system? No, religious trauma is trauma that you have endured from any religion. And religious trauma is different and looks different for each person who has been a victim of traumatic experiences within their religion. Then Jason asked, are most panic attacks usually called, I think you meant caused by fears? There's many reasons for panic attacks, and some come on with absolutely no catalyst involved when you suffer from panic attacks. So it's different from person to person. Religious trauma syndrome comes from the religion and from the people. It can come from both. You really should go research it, because today's topic is not religious trauma syndrome. We're just talking about how the fact that Deborah brought that up in the book and what it looks like to each of us. When I deconstructed, I don't think I realized that I had any trauma at first. You know what I'm saying? Because I didn't leave because of something happened at the church or something like that. Like some people do, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you left because you were hurt, you should leave. Like you should not stay in an abusive relationship for anything. I hate when Christians go, who hurt you or whatever. Well, if somebody hurt me, shouldn't I leave? Like what's your point with that question, But I didn't realize that I had religious trauma at first. It would take a while of deconstructing before I would realize the constant feeling that you are not good in and of yourself, that only God is good, and no matter what you do, if you do anything good, you're supposed to give God the glory. So you never feel good. Like you always feel like a dirty rag, you know? I didn't realize how much that affected me, if that makes sense. Oh, look
Right.
how beautiful you are. I'm going to put you on the big screen now.
Oh, jeez.
So, there you go. And so I think that reading books like yours and and deconstructing has helped me really address the fact that I did suffer trauma and that I do need to address those issues in order to heal myself now, if that makes sense. Okay, here we go. In your book, you saw church signs indicate the level of cognitive dissonance. Faith triumphs over facts really stood out to me. Is it really possible to believe in the God of the Bible without cognitive dissonance?
I really don't think so. You have to suspend logic in order to believe in this book. Because otherwise, I mean, unless you're loosely basing your belief system off of this book, and what I mean by that is you're saying, okay, I believe in a biblical God, but I don't actually believe that all of these bad things are from him. So, if you're loosely basing, sure, because you're not suspending logical, critical thinking.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that was another thing that I still come to terms with every time we go over Bible verses together when we're doing our Bible study on Wednesday, things like that, where I go, oh my God, I had so much cognitive dissonance. And it's almost cringeworthy how much it was in my life,
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. I still can't get over my own thoughts and my own things. You talk about the fear you had as a child of being left behind if you couldn't find your parents, yet the rapture doctrine is relatively new, correct? I found that the teachings began around the 1830s.
Well, I also, that was one thing that I had just a nagging feeling of after. I was like, well, if this isn't right, if this isn't real, if this is silliness, I could toss it away. But the concept of hell was so deeply embedded. I had so much trauma surrounding the concept of hell. They did one of the churches I went to did a hell play inside the congregation.
Yeah.
And it was so morbid. It's just draped in all of this red lighting with like the fabric that would, kind of flicker with wind underneath it. Between that and then that TBN broadcast that had the sounds of hell, like they said, there's these drillers, they drilled 5 miles down and it started spinning, and then they sent measuring instruments down into this hole, and they found that it was really, really hot, and you could hear all these screams, and that so deeply embedded a feeling of fear that it was nagging. But I came across a video because I was like, well, to hell, has anybody debunked that? And sure enough, the sounds that they had broadcasted on TBN were in a loop, and a very short loop too. So like, if you're going to measure the sounds of hell, you would think that we would have an authentic hour-long strip of these screams. But no, they found that it had been, created kind of poorly, and it was on a loop.
Oh, wow.
So that sort of snapped me out of it. I'm like, okay, there's no evidence of hell. folks.
Yeah, yeah. Tracy, did you like find yourself having fears of being left behind?
You know, surprisingly not. Instead, I was terrified that the rapture was going to happen and I wasn't going to be able to reach certain people. It was actually it was actually put on me when I was about 14 or 15 that my paternal grandfather wasn't saved. And it kind of became my dad's mission to teach me how to evangelize my grandpa. So my rapture nightmares were all about him being beheaded.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know what I thought. I listened to too many Left Behind books, the Left Behind
Oh,
series.
Yeah, I read
And
those too.
I thought there would be this holy war, and then I needed to raise up my kids to be these like warriors for the holy war or something. I don't know. It was just so ridiculous.
It's not a bad thing to be prepared, but when you're basing why, you know, you have to be prepared for the holy war.
Right,
Yeah, okay.
right. I didn't actually say those words to them. Like, I just had it in my head. So like what I did was like want them to be very knowledgeable about the Bible, and you know, and I don't know. And so yeah, I had some
about,
weird thoughts.
How about A Thief in the Night?
Oh yes, yes. A Thief in the Night.
So
And
I
somebody
watched
brought up
that.
the movie Tribulation too.
I watched A Thief in the Night for the first time in over 25 years. Last Halloween.
Oh wow.
A little gift to myself. And I didn't actually remember the ending until I watched it again. So I had these like little snapshot images of what I had seen, you know, way back when, but I didn't actually realize just how sinister that movie is. It's very like Twilight Zone-ish.
Yeah.
And the ending caught me by surprise. Like that was a twist I hadn't seen coming. And I was like, oh shit, that's...
I'm gonna have to watch that again, like, cause it's been so many years, I don't even remember it. Jason, you
Right.
said that you were Presbyterian in the chat, and you want to know what churches we went on to because they sound weird to you. I'm not going to ask my guests to reveal that unless they decide to, but Presbyterians sound weird to us too. You do realize that that's why there's different denominations, is because Christians thought the other ones were weird. So all Christianity sounds weird to me now, to be honest with you. So, okay, I really like that you brought up Pastor Hagee, who tweeted, "If you are not an eyewitness, you are a false witness." Exodus 20:16. If you didn't see it, you shouldn't be gossiping about it. Even though we can apply it to the Gospels, do you think the verse was actually speaking of false testimony, slander, and perjury?
I can't insert a narrative there that isn't there. So it doesn't say this is only going to apply to this. So technically, we should be applying it to anything.
We should, right? Because I know that people are going to say that it's only about false testimony, slander, and perjury. But I think you brought up a brilliant point, was that these people were not eyewitnesses.
Right.
And so we shouldn't be listening to them.
Yeah, the whole Gospels can be tossed out at that point because they were all written. I mean, if we're going by stylometric analysis, then the entire New Testament wasn't written until the 2nd century, meaning they're not eyewitnesses, so they should just zip it.
Jason, I think you missed the point of what I just said. I was just saying that he quoted that, but it comes from the Bible, Jason. It comes from Exodus 20:16. You asked the question, does the Bible contain good principles? To which you responded, yes. I have a hard time seeing that. What are some of the principles you find to be good in the Bible?
I honestly think that going into your prayer closet is a good thing. I think that if you're going to pray, you shouldn't be out there raising your hands and and causing a ruckus and speaking in tongues with no interpretation. You shouldn't be telling people, I'm going to pray for you. Like I don't think that's a good principle. I think if you're going to be in your closet, be in your closet. That's a good principle, in my opinion. You don't need to be right. I think when it says to think on good things, right? That's a good principle, right? We already know based off of science that if somebody constantly looks and thinks about all of the negative things, that's going to change the way they think. And that's not a good thing. So yes, there are some good principles, but there's not a lot.
Okay, that's true. Tracy, did you have any principles that you still think are good from the Bible? Like I totally see your point now. I guess that sometimes, like, I don't know, now I see so much negative, it's hard for me to see the good in the Bible. But are there things that you find still to be helpful in your daily life, Tracy?
I think I stuck with Christianity as long as I did because I loved the principles that it discussed about community, about lending a hand to one another, about, feeding the widows and taking care of the orphans. Things like that really kept me in a lot longer than it should have. And based on what we're doing in the deconstruction community, I think that could still apply. So.
Let's see. You mentioned God has never said a prophecy can be used twice. This was so eye-opening to me. I loved this too. I was like, oh my God, they do it all the time. So
Right.
Is that to say that if there is a prophecy in the Old Testament that was fulfilled by, say, David, or that we know was fulfilled by like a historical figure like Nero or something, or whoever, then Jesus can't also claim it was a prophecy about him.
Right. When I was waking up and I was writing this book and like I would have aha moments all the time, and I was constantly walking around with a notebook. It was by my chair. I had one in the kitchen, and I was just like, wait a minute. If this, then this. Like I said in the beginning, I use this concept of modus tollens all the time now. So if this is true, then this cannot be true. And I started realizing how many things were problematic. And so if you have a prophecy and it's fulfilled in that timeline, that's the mark of a prophet that's speaking by God. It's already been fulfilled. Why the heck are you applying this twice?
Right. Like it never dawned on me. Like until I was reading your book. I'm telling you guys, if you haven't got the book, you need to get it. Crucifying the Bible by Deborah Grace. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Audible. Honey, can you quit crunching that? But also Tracy and Patrina, if you have questions for Deborah, you can come in at any time. Okay. I just have a list just to keep the flow going, and because I wrote them down as I was listening on Audible. You talk about Jesus not being God. You point to scriptures that support that he is not and could not be God. Do you remember how you felt when you first came to this realization that Jesus was indeed not God?
I don't think that I ever fully thought that Jesus was God. I understood the Trinity. Like I spent some time, my son's father was a youth pastor for 2 different churches, and one of them was Lutheran. So they really had a deep embedded concept of the Trinity. But I never fully understood it. In 41 years, I'm like, this does not make sense. I guess this is one of those mysteries that I'm going to ask God when I get to heaven. And that's how I had rationalized it. And I had even asked pastors about it, and they're like, yeah, it's a pretty abstract concept. And while we try to explain this, there's a lot of people, even some of the smart, brilliant ones, that don't really grasp it. But it's a spiritual concept and da da da. So I never really felt like Jesus was actually God. And then as I got older and I was really deep in the scriptures, I was like, there's no way he could be. He says, no one is good but the Father. He says, not my will, but your will. And that to me said, there's no way he could be. You're talking about two different, not the same characteristics and behaviors, thought processes. They can't be the same. So when he says, that he's sitting on his right hand, well, are you saying he's sitting on his right hand? No. He's seated at his right hand. They're not the same.
Right. Tracy or Patrina. Oops, I'm sorry. Somebody guessed it, and I'm trying. Why can't I get back to my screen? Trying to see who's guesting up.
I'm going to grab. Hold on.
You go right ahead. Tracy, Patrina, do you guys remember how you felt when you first realized that Jesus was not God?
Showing connected?
Yeah.
Am I showing connected? Okay.
Yep, you sure are.
I'm out at my campsite. It's raining, so I didn't know if I would be able to connect or not. But I never really thought that my whole time as a Christian. I never thought he was God. I always thought he was the son of God. So yeah, I don't get it how they think he's God.
Well, because I was stupid. Okay, no, I'm just kidding.
Are we all?
No, because he did the miracles and he said nobody gets to the Father but through me, and because he said when you see me you see my Father, I thought that those were words that were implying we are the same guy, we're the same dude. I'm just here on earth right now. So and I believed in the Trinity, even though I didn't fully understand it. I tried to I tried to make it make sense.
So there's this verse that says that I and my Father are one, right? And a lot of people love to bring that one up. When I was married to my husband, we were one flesh. That same word is used in concept. So it's not talking about they're one and the same person.
Right. That's the way I always looked at it.
They are united. They're united as one.
Right. But in my mind, it didn't work like that. I'm just trying to explain to you because Patricia said I didn't understand how people saw that. Also, Joel brings up a good one, was in the beginning was the Word and the Word was God, So I knew Jesus to be the Word, but he was also God. But like I said, I had to play mental gymnastics to make it work. And I'm not sure I actually fully understood a concept that I was believing in. I was believing with blind faith that all this was like somehow true. Light of Asta, if you have any questions, please feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I'll just keep going down my little list of questions here.
Thank you. There was just a transphobic person in the comments, so I just came up so I could better pay attention to the conversation and stop being a keyboard warrior, but I think they left. So I just wanted to come up to be more mindful.
If you ever have a problem like that, Tracy is a mod and you can tag her and she'll take care of them for you, because we don't allow that in my chats.
Can I address one of the comments?
Absolutely. Always, Deborah.
Okay. So there's they're saying in the beginning was the Word and the Word was God and the Word was with God. And then moving on to 1:14 where he became flesh, right? The Word became flesh. That word became is a creation type of verbiage in the Greek. But there's an Old Testament verse that said that, actually, let me find it real quick so I don't, and again, I address this in my book. And so if anybody is wanting to have questions, let's see if I remember where it's at. there's a verse that says that neither he was not formed, right? God was not formed. I think it's going to be in the plumb line.
Yes, I remember that.
Bear with me, guys. I just don't want to misquote this.
While she's looking that up, you guys keep tapping the screen, y'all. Let's try to get this out to 10,000 likes, get it out in the algorithm so other people can hear about her amazing book. Go ahead.
So Isaiah 43:10, no other God was formed before or after. So formed would be became. The word became is a creation. Like if he was created in his mother's womb, right? If he was born into flesh, then he was formed after God. God here is saying there's no other God that was formed before or after me. He also says in Exodus 20 verse, 2, you shall not have any other gods before me, right? That word in Hebrew is al panah, and it means upon my face. So when the New Testament takes liberty to say that Jesus is God, they're putting a face on God. And he says, don't do that.
Yep.
Well,
It's all right, you guys.
There's another scripture that says he was made perfect through his suffering. So he wasn't born perfect. He was made perfect through his suffering.
He grew in grace and favor with man. How can you grow in grace and favor if you were perfect all the time?
True. Okay, you brought up a little detail that had me wanting to know a little bit more. You said that none of the sin sacrifices were male lambs. What is the significance to the fact that none of the sin sacrifices were male lambs?
Because they try to claim that Jesus is the Lamb of God that comes to take away the sins of the world. But there was no exception for a male lamb in the Old Testament sin sacrifice laws, whether you're looking at Leviticus chapters 4, 5, or 17. I didn't find that. If anybody else finds that, please correct me. But the Passover lamb is also not a sin sacrifice. It's a memorial of the story of Exodus.
Right.
But it has nothing to do with redemption of sins or atonement. So, that I think that's really interesting. That was really interesting for me to find out.
Yeah, I agree. It really is interesting. Listen, if I don't know you this morning, I'm not bringing you up because this is not a debate. If you have a question for the author, Deborah Grace, please feel free to put it in the comments. If I know you and you want to come up and chat and talk with Deborah, then I will bring you up. But I'm protecting this live today because this is not about debating biblical theology and dogma. It's about talking about her book and what you can learn by picking up her book. So that's what we're talking about today, okay?
Technically, the book is actually debating.
True, but I just don't want them to come up and do that to you this morning. I just want this to be us talking about it and getting answers to some of the questions about it. The other thing I found interesting about that they were female lambs for the sin sacrifice is that there's a lot of sacrifice of women in the Bible in general, like well,
it does talk about a male bull for the rulers and a young bull for, a little bit breaking off to a smaller hierarchy. Then it talks about if you can't afford a female goat or a female lamb, then you can do turtle doves. And if you can't do turtle doves, you can do flour. But when it talks about flour, it says, but do not put oil on the sacrifice. you wouldn't have that. This is what I want to explain. You wouldn't have that specific requirement for just the poor, that you can't put oil on them. It would have translated into all of those.
Right.
I just wanted to say that because, Christ means the anointed one. He was anointed specifically for his death. Don't anoint a sin sacrifice.
Yeah.
That was a big one for me. Like,
okay, and so that was kind of my next question. It leads into it. You explained several ways in which Jesus was not handled like an appropriate sin sacrifice, and can you explain some more of that?
right. So, according to sin sacrifice law, the sacrifice is supposed to be unalived very quickly, and the blood is supposed to be drained out at the base of the altar, and the altar is consecrated and anointed, but the sin sacrifice is not. And the blood is then sprinkled on the four corners of the altar. And the priests, the Levitical priests that were anointed by God as a priesthood forever, are the ones that are supposed to handle the sin sacrifice. And nobody else is to even come near the sin sacrifice. And it's supposed to be offered in the temple, and Jesus is offered at Golgotha, and like over and over and over and over throughout this whole thing. And it's burnt, not hung. There's another verse in the Bible that says, "He that is hung is cursed of God." And you're not supposed to shed innocent blood in the land because it causes a curse on the land. And all these things over and over and over, I'm just like, but okay, there's no transaction that God says, oh, by the way, the Messiah is going to be a sin sacrifice. It never says that anywhere in the Old Testament. And the Old Testament was written first, and it's the plumb line. And God doesn't speak anything that's going to happen without his prophets, unless it's through his prophets. And Isaiah 8, chapter 8, verses 16 and 20, anything added to the law and the prophets must align with the law and the prophets, otherwise there's no light in them. And so all these things are just falling into place for me. And I'm just...
That's crazy.
That's how I felt when I was reading your book. Go ahead, Patrina.
I was just saying, it's crazy how it's totally opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, as a Christian, I was taught a lot of weird things. As a Christian, I was taught that Jesus was the Passover lamb. As an adult Christian, I read the story of the Passover in the Bible, and I was confused when I realized that God said the Passover was to be an ordinance forever. So does this mean Jesus could not have been the Passover lamb?
Oh, absolutely. He could not have been. He participated in Passover before he was unalived. The Last Supper is Passover. And when people understand that, they're like, yeah, he can't. Passover was done before he was unalived.
And I don't like, these are the kind of things that I realized that they twisted when, when they were indoctrinating me. And you hear the preacher preach on Easter Sunday morning, and he's talking about the Passover and how Jesus is now the Passover lamb. And yet when you go and read the actual story of the actual Passover, and you realize, wait a minute, we're supposed to do this forever. Mm-hmm. And yet, good morning. I am everywhere. I'm like MasterCard. I'm everywhere you want to be. Anyway, so yeah,
so cute.
It was just really like when you wrote it in the book too, I was just like, yeah, that was another very confusing thing to me. Like so when I tell people, no, I am not a Christian. When I tell people that my deconstruction was a very long process, I think it started while I was yet a Christian, but I just didn't know that that's what I was doing by pondering these things like, wait, how can this be? Why don't we celebrate Passover anymore if God said forever? Like, and not understanding like how they were inserting Jesus into that narrative that where he did not belong, you know, and it would just confuse me, and then there would be another question and slowly another question, you know. So I think it was a very long process for me. I love how you compare Jesus to the mob. That was so good. And you said, if you want protection, you have to pay. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? That was a good comparison.
Yeah, I actually say this sometimes in my lives too. You know, believe or perish, right? It's a threat. It's extortion, and it's very similar to like the mob boss sending his henchmen out to a business, right? And saying, and this actually happened quite often in the 20s and 30s. The mob would come to your business and say, you know, you need to pay this mob boss. We'll call the mob boss Dave, right? So pay Dave. You have to pay Dave, and he'll protect your business. Oh,
yep.
Protect my business from what? From who? Oh, from Dave. He'll burn your business down if you don't pay Dave. That's extortion and threats. Full stop. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And that doesn't sound like a good thing. I don't need an ultimatum, you know, being shoved in my face. Nobody likes that. And it's not it isn't a dichotomy. Life is not a dichotomy. We don't know, you know, everybody goes to sleep and they are going to have different dreams, right?
Yeah.
Concept of the multiverse is becoming widely accepted. Who's to say we don't have our own dream type state after death, right? So if you could have an infinite number of possibilities that happen after we end a life here on Earth. And if that's the case, then why are we accepting this one narrative that doesn't even sound that pleasant? Heaven does not sound pleasant. Every knee shall bow.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, no free will there. Okay, So what? You have the smoke that ascends to heaven, in heaven forever, and then your tears are wiped away. So while your family and friends are supposedly burning in hell for all eternity, you don't have compassion anymore in heaven, or you don't even remember them. And well, gee, a mind wipe doesn't sound great either. But you know, you're on your knees praising forever. That does not sound pleasant to me. So, you know, hard pass.
Yeah, I agree. When you mentioned this, it reminded me of the meme of the picture of Jesus knocking on the door, and then somebody put, "Let me in. I want to save you from what? From myself." You know, like what on earth? You know?
Right.
Okay. Let's see, where are we? Deuteronomy 23:2, a bastard shall not enter into heaven. And I condensed that just now. Okay. A bastard shall not enter into heaven. I know you brought this up concerning Jesus, but doesn't this also indicate that if you were born out of wedlock, even if you give your life to Christ, you will still not go to heaven?
I actually had a family member several years ago who read that scripture and could not understand it, right? But they took their faith to the next level because of that verse and said, I'm going to prove God wrong. Like there's no way that just because, well, and they weren't even born out of wedlock, they were conceived out of wedlock. So that whole concept to them was like, I can't be the one. I can't be the one that isn't part of the God's kingdom. So they went like totally next level in their faith. Technically though, if you're reading those scriptures, which is weird, the orphans would be, you know, there's some people who would be orphans who were born out of wedlock, technically considered bastards. And you have one command to take care of the orphans. But why? Like, they're not going to get to heaven.
Right?
Like, this doesn't line up to a loving, benevolent, compassionate God.
Yeah, I agree. Trevor, you wanted to come up and speak on this.
Yeah, hey guys, it's Chop. I changed my name so for my
Oh,
stuff.
okay.
I won't talk about that here. I wanted to talk on this for a second, if that's okay. Since you guys were,
Absolutely.
yeah, I grew up Catholic, and I really, really hate patriarchy. Um, it wrecked my mom. Um, I was born out of wedlock, and my grandparents, who were also Catholic, and the Catholic Church called me a bastard child and said, "You do not have our blessing. You will not get any help from us unless you move in to my grandparents' house, my dad's parents' house, and get married right now. You won't get anything from us." And I've been the black sheep of my family my whole life. Yeah, it's not cool. I'm not going to go into detail and trauma dump about what me and my mom went through, but we had to deal with a lot of trauma and abuse and stuff. And as a result, like she was just forced to marry my dad, like basically. And now she's like really struggling still late in her life because of it. So that type of thing really impacts people. I don't know if you guys can hear the shakiness in my voice, but like it
Yeah.
impacts me, and I'm 31 years
Yeah,
old.
we can.
Yeah. So it's not like I just hate that type of language and like ideology with like somebody's a bastard if they're born out of wedlock. Like, isn't supposedly life a miracle? Like, isn't it a miracle that a woman's body can make a baby? Isn't that a beautiful thing? Like, why aren't we looking at the positives? I don't know. It's like I'm just trying to change my mindset, and that's how I'm looking at it.
Absolutely. I had a niece that was a part of a very large mega church out here and out in Southern California. And when she ended up pregnant, they basically told her to get out. And at the time I was still a Christian, and I was like, that's just not Christian. But is it? I mean, when you read the word, like, I think that Christian is more hateful than when you're in it, that you want to really see. That it says in Deuteronomy 23:2, you're not going to get into heaven. So then why should they help her? And, but at the same time, I was just like, that's horrible, because it was horrible. Like, they shouldn't be kicking her out. So there was the cognitive dissonance again for myself. I was like, they shouldn't be doing that. But then the Bible says,
Well, it's othering, right? But this whole selective supremacy mindset that is woven throughout the entire Bible is definitely there. And this is one of the reasons why I find the Bible to be a clear and present danger to society. It's there's so much othering, his special people, his fan club, his
I agree.
the apple of his eye, and everybody else be damned. Like, if you have a Hebrew slave, they're to be let go in the 7th year. You don't let them go empty-handed. They have paid off their debt at that point. Anybody else, all bets are off. You can keep them for life. You can beat them. You can pass them down to your children. They're your possession and property forever. So it just doesn't make sense. There's not even, it doesn't even seem like there's an option for the release in the year of Jubilee, because it says forever.
Yeah.
That's like when the Levites are given like all those rules, right? And they're promised like that special year of like Jubilee, like they're just like commanded, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, you have a year of Jubilee, and then you have the 7th year Shemitah.
Yeah,
which is the release after, in 6 days you shall labor, and the 7th day you shall rest. It's it's the same concept. And there's a year of release for Hebrew slaves in that Shemitah year.
Yo, I feel dumb for not making that correlation with the sevens.
Yeah, they like numbers in the Bible, and they'll reuse them for lots of things. You guys, thank you so much for liking the live. I really appreciate it. I have a new gift goal of 20 tiny dinies, but please gift our panel too, because any gifts you send help push out the live. So it doesn't have to be me. Send hearts, send whatever you can to anybody on the panel. It really does help. You talk about how the Old Testament doesn't talk about a Messiah dying and rising again on the third day. And Demi pointed out the other night, I don't know if you were there or not, I can't remember. Maybe it was in Joyful's live, so I'm not sure if you were in the chat. The Amos 3:7 says that God would have told the prophets if he had a plan. So he would have told them if this was the plan. He would have, we would know that he was going to actually die and resurrect again, because the prophets would have already said that. Am I right?
There's about 10 chapters that are absolutely jam-packed full in Isaiah. So if you start at like chapter 38, maybe 40, and you read all the way up until chapter 52, you're going to see God say in every conceivable way, at every conceivable opportunity, that he is God and he is God alone. He doesn't share his glory. He doesn't want you putting anything else first. There was no one formed before or after. Every conceivable way. And if I were teaching a course at a university and I said, tell me how many different ways that you could say, I'm it. There's no one else. I'm it. And you would get 100 different answers. And there's almost 100 different answers of God telling you, there's no sidekick here coming. I'm your redeemer. I am your salvation. I don't share my glory. I am it. I don't know any more he could have said to describe that he's the salvation. And all of those, explanations saying he is God and he is God alone would have been perfect opportunities to say, oh, but by the way, the Messiah that's supposed to come, he's going to be your salvation. You have to believe in him to be saved.
Well
But
said.
that never happens.
Well said.
Yep. Never happens. Okay. This might be a little bit deeper to get into, but I just was hoping you can help me here. You talk about the JEPD theory, and I am just learning about this myself. Is there a way you could kind of explain it to me like I'm 5?
So this is more of an academic level dissection of the scriptures. It's also called the documentary hypothesis. And don't feel bad, because I didn't know anything about it in my first book interview either. When somebody asked me if I knew about it, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. They don't talk about this in churches, because
right.
that would peel some of the wallpaper off of the wall, and you would see what's underneath.
Exactly.
So there's. They've sort of done in the same way that the stylometric analysis figures out if you have more than one author of a particular writing. They kind of did that with the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. And what they found is that there's about 4 or 5 different contributors to these books. And so you have different narratives that are woven through, and you have a Yahwist narrative, an Elohist narrative, a priestly narrative, and I'm going to butcher this, Deuteronomical narrative. And they're also saying there could be a Q narrative, so that would be the 5. And so when you have a priestly narrative that contradicts with a Yahwist narrative, that's why they said, okay, this couldn't be a single author. So what's going on here? That's pretty much the cliff notes of it.
Okay. That makes so much more sense to me. And I know there's resources for me to go out there and find the comparatives, so that I could be reading a chapter and see where I'm getting the different narratives from. But I really was trying to understand that better, and I appreciate that. That really does help. By the way, anybody up here, if when we're talking about these things, you have a further question for Deborah, please feel free to chime in. This is you guys. This is your chance to talk to her and talk to her about the things that are in her book. You also point out a lot of times where the New Testament claims as it is written, or so the scripture might be fulfilled, but we can't find the scriptures the New Testament writers were pointing to. How significant is that?
It's huge. It's huge because it seems to be pulling things out of thin air. Now, if you were to include, and I did this because I have an apocryphal Bible, but even if you're looking for those specific verses in the apocryphal texts, you don't find them. It's not for lack of trying. People have tried, but when it says in the Corinthians, for this cause, or as it is written, Jesus was crucified, buried, and rose again on the third day. As it is written. Well, okay, so in order to properly look at that, when it says as it is written, it is referring to the law and the prophets. And anybody who has a basic understanding of the Bible and teaches is going to know that's what that's referring to. So while some pastors might say hallelujah, as it is written, and they're going back to the New Testament didn't exist at the time. They were clearly talking about the law and the prophets. And if the law and the prophets don't say anything like that, then it's just pure fan fiction. Right?
And people will point out, like Christians will sometimes say, well, he said that all of the scriptures, are God breathed or blah, 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 or whatever, right? But when they were saying that, the only scriptures that existed were the Old Testament. So to say that about the whole New Testament is inaccurate. Those weren't even written yet. So anyway, I thought that was a really good point.
This part, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Deborah.
I just want to really quickly say that, Jesus didn't walk around with the New Testament under his arm. Neither did Paul.
No.
I was going to say this part is kind of what woke me up when I saw the New Testament referring to scriptures in the Old Testament that weren't even anything to do with what they were trying to say they were in the New Testament. This is kind of what woke me up. And I thought, these are just authors trying to build a story. And so they thought, this sounds most familiar with the story that I'm building, so I'm going to use this.
There's, if I could just really quickly, because I think I have a ghost in my kitchen. So there's another verse in Isaiah 45, 22 through 23, where God says, look to me and be saved. He doesn't say, look to the Messiah and be saved. He says, look to me and be saved. I am God, there is none else. Unto me every knee shall bow. So when Philippians 2, 9 through 11 writes, they completely bastardize that verse and said that God has exalted Jesus. God said he didn't exalt anybody. He said, I don't share my glory. At the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. That is not what the Old Testament verse says. That one blew me away.
Absolutely. So many things in your book blew me away, by the way. Logic, we're talking about Deborah's book today. And if you have any questions when we're doing this, please feel free to ask her questions as we go along. Her book is Crucifying the Bible. It is available on Amazon. And you can get it on Audible, which is how I get it. That's why I don't have one to hold up. I have her book, read the book. It's a great book, but I have it on Audible. I find it very interesting that there are more. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I want to go back to this one. You talk about the new covenant and how Christians find the law to be bondage. After speaking to many Christians, why do you think so many of them hold tight to this narrative?
Oh, that the Old Testament is bondage?
Yeah. Like that nobody can uphold those. All those laws were just so difficult and nobody could do it. Even though the Bible says that his laws are easy.
Right. He says that my laws are easy. My law is sweeter than honey. No one needs to go and get it for you because it's near and dear and in your heart that you may do it. It's not too hard. He literally says it's not too hard.
Right?
And when you break it down, and this is one of the weird things, you anywhere between 613 and 634 laws in the Old Testament. So depending on who you're pulling from, they're going to give you a little bit different number, but it's pretty close. Not all the laws are for each individual person. Some of the laws are for the priests. Some of the laws are for men. Some of the laws are for architects. Some of the laws are for the sick. Some of the laws are for menstruating women or women who have just given birth. Some of the laws are for purification. Some of the laws are ceremonial. And when you break it down and really narrow down which ones apply to you on a day in, day out basis, it's not really all that many. And
Right.
so when they say, oh my gosh, you have so many laws, how can anybody do this? You haven't read them, obviously.
Yeah. And they're very quick though to want to hold on to the 10 Commandments, which is like what?
Which
and,
one?
You know, yeah, exactly. I always ask them which one. They're like the 10. You know, the one that Moses got. Okay, again, which one? But you know, they don't know. They don't know that exists.
Are we talking
I find
about the 10 that actually says they're the 10 that you
right?
can't boil a baby goat in its mother's milk, or you have to actually obey the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of First Fruits? And
they're never talking about that 10. That's not the 10 they're
never
ever
talking about that 10. Exodus 34, guys.
I find it very interesting that there are more laws, commandments in the New Testament than the Old Testament. That was an aha moment when you said that in your book. But Christians often say to me, they don't have to follow any laws in the Bible because of Jesus. So are Christians saying they are just basically free to sin? I feel like they are saying that, and that I'm going to hell because I don't believe, even if I don't commit the sins. Like, I find it to be this weird dichotomy. Like, I don't have to follow the laws because I'm a Christian and Jesus' blood washed over me, and you're going to hell just because you don't believe, even though you don't do all the dirty deeds I do.
That's a mouthful. I used to laugh and say, if I wanted to sin, I would still be a Christian.
Yeah, true, right?
That's a
Because
good
it's just
one.
about
I have to
forgiveness.
remember that.
Well, okay, but the problem is there is no forgiveness for intentional sin, right? You turn from intentional sin, but there's no more atonement for intentional sin. God was crucified. If you intentionally sin afterwards, you're putting him back on the cross. He doesn't want that done. So the New Testament narrative is pretty clear on that. But I find it kind of funny. Somebody mentioned this a little while ago, and if I could just real quickly address this, and I don't know if it's one of your questions, so I apologize, but
Oh, no, go right ahead.
they mentioned the new covenant, right? I do want to point out that the new covenant, you're not in it. You're just not in it. There are prophecies attached to a new covenant that haven't been fulfilled. So if they're not fulfilled, then you're not in a new covenant. And they're very similar to the prophecies that, Jesus was supposed to fulfill. And if you're claiming that Jesus has to come back to fulfill those prophecies, and you're applying that to him, then you can't apply that. I mean, the logic doesn't line up to say you're in a new covenant. Either all of them are fulfilled and Jesus has fulfilled all the prophecies, and then you're in a new covenant, but you can't separate those two.
Right.
Because Jesus didn't fulfill them, but he's still the Messiah. New covenant's not fulfilled, but you're in a new covenant. Like the math is not mathing.
No, it's really not.
How many laws did you say that there were in the New Testament? I need to look up the laws because I haven't really ever studied those.
Oh, I don't know that I have a number in there. Maybe I did, and I had done the research at one time, but I can't pull that off the top of my head. But you can probably do a Google search and find out.
There's around 1,000. I think you mentioned in your book there's like 1,000 or something like that. You may have said the exact number. I can't remember.
That's crazy.
I mean, when you're talking about that a deacon has to have one wife and he has to be, controlling his family. You have a woman that should cover her hair when she's prophesying, and young widows should get married and get married quickly. Otherwise, they may have turned to Satan. And pray without ceasing and think on these things. When you put them all together, there's a ton more laws in the New Testament than there are in the Old.
Biblical scholarship in the chat logic says that there's around 1,050-ish.
There it is.
Yeah, that's just wild. That is wild.
It blew my mind. I was like, wait, I never thought about that. That's crazy. You said when you remove the requirement to obey, then you remove personal responsibility. And I found this to actually remind me of the scripture that says to obey is better than sacrifice. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that one's pretty self-explanatory. I don't know that I can really add much to that one. I find it interesting when Christians say that it's about a relationship.
Yeah.
No, it's not. No, it's not. God cares more about what you do. In fact, he keeps a record of your wrongdoings for the day of judgment. So, which isn't the definition of love.
No, right? Yeah, go right ahead.
So in regards to that, so like I hear there, okay, so this regards goes back to like the salvation, right? So if we have like the righteous and the unrighteous in general just kind of hang out together in Sheol, but if we go back to Jesus, that Jesus saved everyone for salvation, I feel like Christians think that they can get a get out of free jail card of not being judged by their actions and the way that they treat people. So would you say that a salvation point can in fact be lost if we go back to where Jesus says, verily, verily, I say unto you, many will come to me on that day, and they'll say, Lord, Lord, I proselytized in your name, I did all this stuff in your name, and he says, I turn away, I never knew you. Wouldn't that be a point that where in fact that you are not necessarily saved by your belief in Jesus alone?
I don't think that anything we do matters. God, many are called, but few are chosen, right? So it's nothing that we can do so that we cannot boast about it. But God's the one that chooses. God's the one that said, I created some people as vessels of wrath for the day of destruction. God's the one in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 who gives a spirit of delusion so that you might believe a lie.
It's crazy. I just made a video about that
there's
earlier
more,
today.
right?
You did?
And all Paul
about
did was
vessels of
boast.
destruction, yeah.
All Paul did was boast the whole time. You can go through there and see all his boasting.
Paul was a diva.
Yeah, definitely.
He couldn't get along with other people Paul was a diva. Let's just be real about that. But yet this concept, read the entire chapter of Romans 9, and you're going to find that there's nothing that we are doing. This concept of predestination is solidly implanted in the Bible.
Yeah,
and
Romans
I don't think
9.
you can get away with.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was going to say,
Romans
Romans 9, 14 through 23, that'll make your mouth drop to see what God's plan really is. Like, it'll make your mouth drop for real.
There isn't anything that we are doing, right? He he knows, right? We're the clay, he's the potter. It's nothing that we can do, so that you can't boast, right? That concept is very, very clear. People tell me, you just need to believe. I'm sorry, this isn't my fault. Your God gave me a spirit of delusion so that I might believe a lie. So go complain to your God. It's not me. Apparently, I wasn't chosen for life. I may have been chosen for the first 41 years, and then he said, never mind.
Yeah. Okay. Hang on with me through this next one, because I see I wrote a little paragraph of my thoughts. So hopefully y'all can follow along here. You talk about God and evil and demons in the Old Testament. Okay. And after listening to that part of your book, it made me think that this God is both the good and the evil in the Bible. Mm-hmm. That a Satan is just anyone who calls him out on his bullshit. The New Testament tried to separate these two characteristics of God and made them seem like two different entities. But it was always God doing good and evil, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil just allowed us to see the truth of who he was. What do you guys think of that? Any of you? Anybody? Deborah doesn't have to be the one to answer this one. What do you guys think of that? Like, literally, there is not the demons like they talk about in the New Testament don't exist in the Old Testament.
We talking about like actual. I'm sorry.
Because Greek mythology got brought into the New Testament.
Okay, so are we talking like demonic energy in some sense, the way it's depicted, like demons, demonic, bad? In that sense,
we're talking about how that's not in the Old Testament, but it is in the New Testament, where they're trying to, and where Christians often like to, Logic, if you want to come back up though, just let me know. You're more than welcome to jump back up. Where Christians like to blame things on the devil and demons and stuff like that. But I am starting to think that because the Old Testament doesn't ever mention it like that, and the only time you see like this Satan figure is that he's like an accuser. That's what he is. So when we ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we really gained the knowledge of good and evil, and that God is both the good and the evil that is occurring in the Bible.
I was gonna bring up something that I had found in Leviticus 16 about casting lots on the two goats. One is for the Lord and the other is for Azazel, who is actually, like, I think we're related to more of an older god, like a half goat, half like nature god that lives in the forest. But it is like later said that like why you do that is you please him because he is like Lord of the underworld, or like Lord of sin, Lord of evil. And that's why the other goat is for this like demon in the Old Testament. But it's not really laid out quite clearly. It just says like out of nowhere, yeah, one of the goats for Azazel, not the good goat. The bad goat's for Azazel, and then we get the good goat for God.
That is weird.
So are you talking about the well, I have a chapter in my book called The Red Heifer and the Scapegoat. And the Old Testament story of the scapegoat, they put the sins on one goat, but then they let him go into the wilderness and he lives. Well, the New Testament says the sins were put on Jesus and he dies. So it can't be a foreshadowing for Jesus.
Right. Well, yeah, and I guess that's what they mean by Azazel. And that was in my NRSV annotated. They were like going into like the sins were left to go into the forest, and then Azazel will take care of it. Like nature will take care of it. But really, you're right. Like it's like putting all the sins in this goat and then let it run off, and it lives while this other one is like just splayed. So
Yeah.
that's like the only thing I could think of, like in the Old Testament. Sorry, for like a demon or something.
So there's also, and just real quickly, I want to discuss the red heifer, because I thought this was so interesting. A lot of people are, the Jews are looking for a red heifer as a sign, right? A perfect red heifer. I just want to
Thank you,
make sure
Mr.
there wasn't
Donald.
my roommate coming through the door. But this is really funny, because it says there are people who parallel this red heifer with Jesus, and I find it really weird to do this, because you have an unblemished, unalived, and burnt cow with her skin, flesh, blood, and dung. So you're going to juxtapose this red heifer with Jesus is bizarre, whose ashes are to be kept in the congregation for a water of separation as a purification. So you add running water to the ashes, you dip hyssop into the water, sprinkle it on the tent, the vessels, and the persons who have touched any unalived thing to be purified of that sin.
Can you
Hold
tell
on,
us where
guys.
that
Hold
was
on,
in the
guys.
Bible?
Hold on.
All right.
Is it Numbers 19?
Give her just 1 minute.
Yeah.
Thank you for the gifts. You guys, I have a new gift goal up, 15 of the little crowns. Make sure that you're gifting Deborah and our panel today. If you are just joining us, we are talking about Deborah Grace's book, Crucifying the Bible. It's available on Amazon and Audible. I highly recommend it. It's very informative. If you are just deconstructing, this book is really, really helpful in the deconstruction process. If you've already deconstructed, I'm telling you, you're going to find things in here that she found during her process that you will not have thought of. You will be blown away by, and it's just so informative. I highly recommend the book.
I
It
saw
is
someone in the comment. I'm sorry, I saw someone in the comment asked if it's on Audible and Spotify.
Yes. It's not to my knowledge on Spotify. It's on Audible.
Okay.
It is Crucifying the Bible.
Yeah, I checked Spotify last week, I believe, and I didn't see it up there.
We need to get her on that.
Okay.
Deborah, you
So
need to get
I
on
had to
Spotify.
switch places because my roommate's going to be coming back and forth through the door, loading stuff into his car, and I don't want to. I don't want to dox my roommate here.
No problem.
So here I am. Yeah, where were we? The red heifer, and I just see that as a the dark magic thing. Like, why are you using ashes of a burnt cow with her dung and blood and flesh as a purification for sins?
Right. Well,
this was one of the forms of atonement for, if you've touched any unalived thing, right? So there's a caveat there. This wasn't necessarily for one of the I would call it the genuine atonements for sin, like the Old Testament says that hyssop can be an atonement, repentance, fasting, so on and so forth. That's not one of these things, but it is a unique perspective. I can't get comfortable.
What book, chapter, and verse was that? I'm sorry. Did you repeat it already? Because I asked again in the chat.
Oh, that concept of the cow.
The red heifer.
Oh, it's in the book. I have an entire chapter on it. I think it's page.
I mean,
85?
in the Bible, where can we find the story of the red heifer?
Oh, okay. Hang on a second. Let me find that for you.
A few places, because you know how the Bible repeats itself in some books.
Right.
Thank you for purchasing the Audible book, Casey. You will not be disappointed. It's amazing. And Mother of Prep, as soon as she answers this, feel free to ask your
Numbers
question.
19.
Yep. 19.
Numbers 19.
Okay, it was Numbers 19. Benny was right. Go ahead, Mother of Prep.
Thank you for having me up. I was so excited when you mentioned red heifer because I have deconstructed. I'm no longer a Christian. I'm atheist. My husband is still very devout. Kojic. I don't know if you guys know that denomination. Anyway, during the eclipse, like it just really got bad. He kept like freaking out, telling me, if I disappear, it's because I've been raptured and the red heifer and they found it and all this stuff. And I grew up in a church that was not very fear based. It was more like the love of Jesus, community service, and promoting education. And we were involved in local politics. It was a different kind of church that wasn't the hellfire, Satan, demons, all of that. But he grew up in a church that was all of that. It's actually what kind of pushed me out of Christianity altogether. Just our conflicting views and seeing like, wait a minute, what is this stuff you believe in? And I don't even come close to believing this stuff. So anyway,
Right.
but these are some of the things that I believe he has religious trauma syndrome, and he has a lot of fear and anxieties about rapture, hell, and the red heifer, all of these different prophecies and stuff. So I'm just trying to connect the red heifer to like current things happening. Like, what is the connection of that? Just so I can, and he did it at one point admit that he apologized for going down the rabbit hole and getting caught up in the YouTube algorithm. So things got better, but I find myself having to kind of talk him off the ledge of a lot of these different things that come up with these like biblical prophecy type of stuff, like red heifer. So I'm just trying to see what the connection of that is with like rapture, and if there's any. I'm
There,
going to
there
get the
really
book.
isn't. There
Okay.
really isn't one. There really isn't a connection with the rapture. There's a connection that Jews see with the arrival of the Messiah, right? And there's
Uh-huh.
going to be potentially a connection, I think, with the millennial
I mean,
reign.
the rumors of wars and the normal phenomena that have always happened around ever
For
since
decades.
the beginning of the
Yeah.
earth, earthquakes and thunderstorms and
Right,
everything.
right. But the connection doesn't seem to really, I mean, line up
Okay,
for
so
me
it's
with the
not like
rapture.
a
I don't
way
think
to
the rapture is
logically.
biblical even, and it's a very new concept
Right. I heard that
in
too, that it's not, that it just kind of came out in like I don't know, the 70s or.
1830s. The
Oh, okay, so a
1830s.
little, so earlier. But yes. Oh my God.
So it was
What?
preached by a preacher starting in the 1830s, and it just caught on.
right.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
so,
thanks for having
oops,
me
I'm
up. I'm gonna
sorry,
get your
moving
book.
my.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can stay up if you want. That way, if you have any other questions, you can feel free to jump in and ask Deborah a
Great.
question. Um, but yeah, absolutely. Her book is amazing. I promise you won't be disappointed. Deuteronomy 24:14 says, "You will not oppress a worker." And you point out the churches do this every Sunday. I found that to be an amazing connection that you made. This week, Thinker talked about church hurt. Many people came forward with stories about how they tithe regularly, and then some financial burden hit their family, and the church would do nothing to help. You point out pastors are not Levitical priests and churches are not the temple. Can you elaborate a little bit on this?
I mean, this is one of the worst, in my opinion, the worst forms of theft. And God's telling you don't steal, right? And any pastor that should be looking at context, because context matters, people.
Yes.
Then you have to actually pull in the entire message of what tithing looks like. There's only 2 times in the Bible that talks about a tithe of all, and those are not commanded by God. So when tithing is instructed to be about feeding the orphans and the widows and the disadvantaged and the outskirting of society, right? Those people that have been othered or fallen on hard times, those are the people that are supposed to be being fed. So when you read about the the verses that talk about tithing, it's always related to eating it, to that they may be filled, that the storehouses may be full, right? This is stores, storehouses. We're talking about food. And unless you are feeding these people who we should have a heart to love, and not doing it, it is the highest form of hypocrisy in my opinion. And don't oppress a worker in his wages. Well, if you're putting your hand out for money for your cut of somebody else's hard-earned money, you're doing that. You're stealing from them.
Absolutely.
This is one of the first cracks in the armor that got me into my conversion process. Before I was challenged to, reverse lenses, that was something that caused me and my ex to be shunned by the church, was that we stopped tithing. Because I had dug in and said, wait a minute, this isn't biblical. This isn't, why are we doing this?
Do you have a good verse for that? Sorry.
Oh, I have a whole chapter on tithing in my book.
Okay,
An
I'll look at
entire
that.
chapter.
The one that Crystal said was Deuteronomy 24:14, I believe.
Yeah.
Did you guys see where?
Did
you guys see where
Let me-
Creflo Dollar came out and admitted that? Okay, go ahead.
Just one second, because I don't want people running to the Audible. You don't get the tables in the Audible. The reader doesn't read out all of the verses that I found and utilize.
It's
in
true.
the Audible.
Just so you know, and if I had to do it all over again, I would have got her book because you're going to get the tables, and they mention them in the Audible, but you don't get them. Okay, so you want to be able to see those things. Not only, but I did both Christ Before Jesus and Deborah's book on Audible because I had some credits, and now I just wish I wouldn't have used them for those. So Casey, you'll still enjoy it. You already got it on Audible. Don't worry about it. You're still going to enjoy it very much. I very much enjoyed it. I just know I would have got a little more if I would have got the actual book. So
It's worth it
just to clarify.
Buy both. If you have the Audible version,
Yeah.
I mean, that'll get you through it. Like having it, because a lot of people just get through books much easier through Audible, but having those tables to maybe reference while you're hearing it, those tables are worth so much. Like my jaw was like dropping, like by the first or second table, I was just like, oh my gosh, this puts it so clearly. Like there's just nothing's lining up here.
Yeah, absolutely. Katrina, what were
I
you
do want to
gonna
also say that
Oh.
if anybody has the Kindle version, you can, and you have Alexa, you can have Alexa read it to you.
Oh, that's cool. Go ahead, Katrina. What were you going to say? Katrina? I know she's in, she has stormy weather where she's at, so she might not be able to hear me right now. Katrina, if you want to come back in and say what you were going to say, let me know and I will shut up. But otherwise, I'm going to go on to the next question because I think you can't hear me for some reason right now. Okay, also when you spoke of... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm sorry that I interrupted Katrina, but I did want to get that out there so that if somebody was in the, getting ready to purchase it in Audible, they knew that.
No, I'm glad because people were asking in the chat too. So you were actually handling what they were talking about in chat right then. Also, when you spoke of tithing, it made me think about how pastors twist the scriptures for their own greed. Take the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and realize that the reason the cities were actually destroyed is because they were greedy and not feeding the poor. We would realize that our pastors and mega churches are doing the same thing. But by them twisting the scriptures and making it about non-hetero people, they can not only demonize a marginalized group of people, but by sleight of hand, making it so you don't see that they are actually in direct opposition with what God was saying in the scriptures. And I found that to be very interesting. Like what they're doing to you people is going, This story is all about the LGBTQIA, not about not feeding the hungry, but that is actually what it was about. They were not doing what God called them to do. And your pastors are doing the same thing. And I just needed to point that out.
I mean,
they are Sodom and Gomorrah.
Can we just take a moment and remember how Greg Locke's tent was ruined by snow?
Oh. You also point out how the tithes are supposed to be, you also point out how the tithes are supposed to be to take care of widows. And yet Jesus points out a widow giving all that she has. And I find this dichotomy when we look at the churches who are fleecing the senior citizens of their pay by manipulating them into giving their retirement, their social security, and everything they have. And it's heartbreaking. These are the people they're supposed to be taking care of, and instead they're fleecing them. And I know these aren't questions. Your book makes you think, you know what I'm saying? Like, your book made me go, not just the things you said, but made me connect other things, if that makes sense. So you guys, I can't say enough good things about her book. It's really going to make you realize things.
So this woman is giving her last two mites, and Jesus is standing there. He doesn't turn around and go, what the heck? Isn't she supposed to be one of the recipients of the tithes?
Exactly.
Like, I would imagine that Jesus would know the scriptures, would know his Torah well enough to be like, there's something wrong here. Why is she doing this? Why aren't you guys feeding her?
Absolutely. And why isn't the church doing it for their senior citizens, for their widows? Instead, they're taking their very last pennies, and they use it as a preaching point to say, you should also give us your very last pennies. I will tell a story.
Test God.
Yep. I've shared this story before on other lives, but when my kids were growing up, we lived in Kansas. My husband was is an aerospace engineer. And in the 2000s, there was issues with Boeing. And if you know anything about Boeing, when there's issues with Boeing, engineers across the United States get laid off by the thousands. And he was one that was caught up in the layoffs in the 2000s. The town that we lived in was a small town called Derby, Kansas, and the entire economy rests on two things in Derby, Kansas, and that is Boeing, which I think is now owned by Spirit. It may have changed back to Boeing now, but it's the same thing, okay? And the Air Force Base. So if anything happens with the Air Force Base or Boeing, tons of families are affected. I would say a majority of the people in the town are affected. So we were not the only ones who were affected. Our children had to go on the little lunch program and stuff. And we just had a hard time making ends meet. We started doing photography, wedding videography and photography at the time to make up the loss of income. But it was a tough time for us. And I never asked the church for anything, but I did come to them for prayer because I, thought, maybe they can pray with me because this has just been very difficult for us. And what I was told was, maybe you just need to up your tithing. Maybe you just need to give more because, the more you give, then more God will give back to you. And I couldn't even barely afford to feed my kids. I wasn't even asking for help, and this was their answer. And I just find it just disgusting. And this is what they do. This is across America, y'all. There are, I'm going to say this any chance I get, 400,000 churches in the United States. There are 600,000 unhoused people in the United States. If those 400,000 people would do what they actually were called to do and take care of the unhoused people, we would not have an unhoused issue today. They only need a sponsor, less than 2 people per church, and it could end tomorrow. But
So
instead, they're fleecing America.
I was going to say, did you guys see Creflo Dollar? You guys know Creflo Dollar, right? The big
No,
he's a big mega church pastor. He came out
Yeah,
this past year and admitted that he had been teaching on tithing for years. He even wrote books about it and everything. And now he has realized that that is part of the old covenant that's not even for today. And he apologized for anyone that he had led astray, yada, 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 and told everybody they could burn his books. And now he knows tithing is not required. But I'm thinking, all that money he got from everybody, did he say, I'll give it back or anything? No, of course not.
That's really interesting. It makes me wonder why he would come out and say something like that. There's got to be something driving that. Because why would you stop accepting it? You know?
Well, I guess he, according to his studies, he's been studying the covenants and realized that it's part of the old covenant.
Yeah. But you know, he's got no morals to actually do that. I mean, come on, right?
Yeah, there's something behind it, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, he's going to say that, but I don't know. Maybe people are starting to call him out.
Was there a lawsuit or something, I wonder?
Right.
maybe, but there's
I
some
didn't find
comments that
anything
said
about that.
he wanted $65 million for an airplane, and then Dealbreaker says he preaches giving more than the tithe now. So I don't think he learned anything. I think it's just another time where they, you know, I don't know, they try to appease people and then they go and do something else. All right. You talk about blood not being needed for atonement. If that is true, why was Cain's offering not acceptable to God? Because I always taught that it was because it wasn't blood.
I don't think that we have an answer as to why Cain's offering wasn't accepted. It doesn't say. So
It never
I mean,
says.
one can assume. Apparently God said it wasn't good enough.
It always hurt me. You
Well, I
know,
follow-
There was
I follow
no
this-
requirement. There was no instruction or command given about an offering up until that point. So it's only, you know, we can only just assume, but I don't know. Nobody knows.
Go ahead, Petrina. What were you going to say?
I follow this Old Testament scholar, and I purchased his book, and that story he claims is based on an old, I don't know if it's from Sumeria or where it's from. It's an old poem of these two twin sisters called Sheep and Grain. And it's actually a poem, it's based off of that poem where these two sisters were battling one another on who was better than the other. And that's where it's actually derived from.
I'll have to look that up. That's very interesting. You guys, can you keep tapping that screen? And I have some gift goals. I have like 15 crowns or something like that. But also, please send gifts to everybody up on the panel. Even Rose's help. When you give, TikTok goes, hey, I might make a little money here, and that helps push the live out to the. Thank you, Mother. To the algorithm. So whenever you're in a live, if you can throw roses up to the panel, to the host, whoever, it really does help. You're doing great work to help us creators be able to keep going. Okay, you talk about the Levitical priesthood, and you talk about how Jesus could not have been a Levitical priest. And then you go further into the details of sacrifices and the correct handling of sacrifices. What significant did these portions of your book have in relationship to the sacrifice that Jesus was to be for the Christians? And I know we kind of touched on that before, but I think the Levitical priest thing, you know, is very interesting too.
So I used to get this all the time, you know, Melchizedek. And I think it's worth pointing out that Melchizedek appeared in Scripture before the eternal priesthood of the Levitical tribe was established. And so you can't go, Melchizedek, Levites, Melchizedek.
Right.
That's not an honest interpretation of the text.
Right. That makes so much sense.
You do such a good job at like making it like clear how important things like Levitical priesthood and their involvement in things like sin sacrifice. It's just such a good way to like break it down for anybody that's like kind of confused, because you get into these big words like Levitical and like big names like Melchizedek, you know, and stuff like that, and people kind of get a little lost in the sauce. But you help like ground that with this book. Like that's just one thing I have to like let everybody know. Like
Really?
it's awesome.
And she does it in such a way that she's taking you through her own personal journey. Okay, so you're with her on her own personal journey as she is finding these out for herself too. So it's in a way not only that's easy to understand, but it's a journey. You're really on a journey with her.
Yeah. And just hearing you speak after like reading the book and the way that you will like point out just the way that you will look at certain words or just a phrase, one single like collection of letters or words, and be like, wait, hold on. Right. And like that's the book. Like that is the book. The way she's talking, like if you are interested in what Deborah has to say, like in any live, read her book, and it'll make you appreciate it so much more.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. Yes, Shy, it is her book, Deborah Grace. She's the author of Crucifying the Bible. And we really want to push this out right now. I really want you to tell all your friends. I really want you to share this because she's working on book number 2 right now. And I'm going to tell you a little secret about being an author because my aunt's an author. So, I've gone through this a lot with her. Leaving a review helps boost her. So leave a review on Goodreads, on Amazon, wherever you can. Also, by purchasing the book and hopefully doing, once she is available for pre-sales on her second book, by doing the pre-sales, you help her in the Amazon rankings, which helps get her book out there even more. So this is the way you help an author.
Well, I don't know because when I published Crucifying the Bible, it wasn't available for pre-sale. I didn't see that option. So the second book, I may have that option, but it's not going to be out until the end of this year.
But I will tell you, whether it does have pre-sale or not, us purchasing, leaving reviews for this book does help your second book get boosted more.
Leaving reviews is definitely a huge help for pushing it out to more people as a recommendation in the algorithm when they search for certain things. It definitely helps. So
it really does. Absolutely. Okay, let's see. You also discussed that the descriptions of Jesus in the Bible show a narcissist. What are some scriptures that really stick out to you that point out that this man was a narcissist?
Jesus or God?
Jesus.
When he says, when he's being asked, his disciples are like, are you it? Are you the Messiah? Are you? And he's like, as you say, I'm leaving it up to you. As you say, not me. I didn't say it. You said it. That just sounds so passive aggressive.
It's true. It's true. That is hilarious.
It didn't hit me until, obviously in hindsight, but
I can see him flipping his hair or blowing on his fingernails as he's saying it.
When he's talking to the Pharisees, I mean, which is how much of the New Testament, there's a lot of like, well, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you more like me? I'm doing all of these things. I am the son of Abraham. Your father is, it's all kinds of just weird of narcissistic talk. There's just a tone to it. I feel like.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm gonna. Where is it? I don't remember if I know where this is. Just.
Pack says he wouldn't have been one to close cabinet doors quietly.
Oh, it's not in that chapter. I don't remember what chapter it's in, but there's. Ooh. Maybe I do.
I only have like one question, but I'll save it kind of to the end. It's kind of like a finisher question. Like,
Okay, and we're almost at the end of my
Go ahead.
questions anyway, Benny.
Go ahead.
well, I'll kind of let you, so maybe you can like think about it too. But like, I think that this is a good question. Like, have you been like disproven yet, or like humbled in any way from the book?
I had a gentleman send me an email. It was a really long review of my book, and he did find a couple of things. And so shortly after I published the book, I republished a revision. So anybody buying the book is going to see in the front end of it that it says revision 1 or revised edition. That's, yeah, I did publish a revised edition, but I mean, why wouldn't I? You know, if I am proven wrong, I'm the first to say, yeah, I screwed up here. So,
That's good.
but since then, no. And I've put the challenge to many believers, you know, if you want to buy my book and read it and you find that there's errors in it, I'll revise it again. I don't have a problem doing that. But if I'm proven wrong, I'll take it down.
That's so
Yeah.
like powerful. I don't know. To me, like, because it's so clear, and like with the tables and everything, it's just so clear, and you're getting so like intrinsic to the book that people like probably don't even know that like half of these subjects are even brought up, you know, and that's why I'm just
Right.
like, you're
Right,
using
and
the
I'm-
book to disprove itself, and this is like a master class.
I want to point out that that's like my next question is that she points out things that you're like, wait, that has been in there all along, but I did not see it the way Deborah saw it. Like, we know that the Bible is very patriarchal and misogynistic. And I love that you pointed out that the women were not to touch him, but it was okay for Thomas to touch him. I think that people always find Jesus to be so loving. And the more I read about him, the more I see what a misogynist he was and what a racist and narcissist he truly was too. I didn't ever realize that he did that until you pointed out in the book that when the women come to him, don't touch me, I'm not, whatever. But Thomas, here, touch my hands. What?
Right. Were the women so dirty that they couldn't come to Jesus? Like, really? Okay.
Right?
That's
the
fine.
women who came to anoint him, the women who came to take care of his body the proper way because they loved him so much. Nah, don't touch me.
And it's not, it literally says why. It says why he didn't touch them. Because I have not yet ascended to the Father. Well, you still haven't ascended to the Father when you tell Thomas to touch you. So,
Yeah. So that was just a bullshit excuse is what we're saying. Okay.
right.
That's because the authors who wrote it at that time, that's the way women were. They were low in status at that time. So that's
Well,
why
like, tainted
the
with
book-
sin.
that's why it was included in the books.
Yep.
I was just gonna say one other thing is like how Jesus talks to the Gentile woman, and makes her get on all fours and bark like a dog. You know, as
Yep.
if that's not like the most dehumanizing thing ever.
Well, he didn't make her do that. He just called her that.
Well, and then she did. Yeah, she went ahead and was like, "Oh, I'll do it." And then afterwards, he was like, "Okay, well, now your faith is proven." And
Yeah, I'm right in the middle of reading Misquoting Jesus by Bart Ehrman, and he goes into detail about this in the 2nd century when these manuscripts were being copied and edited by the scribes. There were parts in there that showed women were either higher up or doing something that normally in this culture they couldn't do. So they had to go in there and revise it and add something to it, like the harlot, the woman that was a harlot and things like that. They had to add that stuff in there. Women not being able to speak in churches and all that stuff. They had to put that in there because they didn't want women to get big headed back in that time and say, hey, we can do this, because they didn't want women to rise up.
But that's just New
Right.
Testament, and Deborah points that out in her book too. That was a New Testament teaching that women shouldn't teach and stuff like that, because that was not true to the Old Testament.
right.
Exactly.
Okay, so you brought up baptism. I really like this too. You brought up baptism and how babies are an amniotic fluid, and how women are like sanctified through childbirth or what have you, and that should transfer to the baby. You were talking about how that should just transfer to the baby, because because people worry about their baby who dies before it's born not being able to go to heaven, and if they are actually kind of baptized in that water and the woman is sanctified through childbirth, then they should be too. And it made me realize that God curses people up to the 10th generation. Why doesn't he bless people up to the 10th generation?
No, I think he blesses them up to the 10th and curses them up to the 4th.
Oh, really? I thought he just curses them up to the 10th. I didn't think he ever.
I may have that backwards, but I
Maybe I just didn't even think he blessed multiple, except for Abraham. I'm sorry. I do realize that he says blesses Abraham and blah blah blah, but I
and
didn't
all his
feel
seed,
like
right?
yeah, which they're not all blessed. So I don't like that was a whole different story for me. It was like, but aren't they all blessed?
Let me add something that's not in the book. So I don't find anywhere in the Genesis account where God is cursing Eve and her descendants for all time. I don't find that there. Where is it?
I don't either.
I think it's a narrative that was just sort of like added after the fact, just that you could demonize women for all time.
I agree because it doesn't say that.
Crystal, was it you that said, I think I was in one of your lives one day when you said the man got the curse to work, for the rest of his life, but they're getting off scot-free because they don't even really have to work today, but women still have to work and give pain in childbirth. So we got double the curses.
Right. We help share his curse now because, hi God Jesus, we shall share in the man's curse now if we say that it was cursed for all generations, because women have to work outside the home now. Okay. So we toil and we have painful childbirth, but men do not share in our curse. We just share in their curse. And many men do not have to toil the ground anymore, which was the curse. They work in offices. And I'm not saying that's not hard work, men. I'm not putting you down. I'm saying that the curse did not last for men like it lasted for women. That is what I am saying. Okay?
Right.
I would even say that it wasn't even a punishment for the so-called, crime or whatever, because wasn't that what man was told to do, to till the land when they were placed in the garden in the first place? So now they're punished by still doing what they were already told to do. Like, there's literally no punishment at all.
If you read the whole curse too, by the way, for the man, It irritates me
He's not
even
for the
more.
man. The man didn't get cursed. The
There's
man
no
did
curse
not get cursed.
whatsoever.
Adam did not get cursed. The ground was cursed for Adam's sake.
Okay, and so if you read it, it also says, and then you will eat the fruit. So let's bring this full circle. The whole thing started because we ate a piece of fruit, and now men get to eat fruit. How's that fair? That's part of it. Read it. It says, and then you will eat the fruit. So yeah. It always, that whole story pisses me off.
It does, especially like looking at like how women were formed. It's like Adam just kind of had a free for all, picking out whatever kind of like animals and beasts or whatever he wanted, and then oh, okay, a woman's cool. Just
Yeah.
like when you're reading that,
After
like I was.
every animal. Oh, okay. I'll take a woman, I guess. Yeah.
Right.
I kind of liked the cow. She was looking hot, but
And I was just watching a documentary, and women had such an important part in early civilizations. It's like a PBS documentary called Civilizations. First episode, they talk about art, and some of the oldest art has women portrayed as like storytellers. So these like very proud, beautiful women. Some of the first like known art like shows women, they have kind of like large breasts or buttocks and stuff, but like these are all very important things. And I feel like when you get into just this creation story, that it's like at the beginning of like just a taking down of that, and maybe like, I don't know, moving on from the old ways, or I just don't know. I don't understand why during the oral traditions, it was the women that were telling these stories in front of everybody else, being dramatic, being like with their arms waving, like they have these beautiful golden rings that they just discovered back in like 2005 of like the Byzantine Empire or the Mycenaean Empire, which is like 5,000 years ago. And there's women, and these women have women that work under them, and they're just like glorified people, or like figures within this art, and that means something, right? And here we are.
Yep. Okay, this is my last question, and then if you guys want to ask questions or discuss anything, we can go from there. But this is the last one I have. You talk about Hitchens. To claim we are born into sin and have to earn our emancipation out of the imaginary threat of hell is the purest definition of slavery. Those who gravitate towards this belief system may desire an authoritative and totalitarian society. I feel that there is some deep connection here between Christian nationalists and Trump supporters who desire him to be their dictator. Do you think that is just a societal issue? Is it a mental health issue? Like, what is causing this desire that some people have to be ruled over? And it's not just now, but it is very prevalent right now in our society.
I think religion plays a big role in that because it kind of grooms people for that type of look. It's easier to not have to do the thinking, to just lend your mind to something else that already tells you what to do. And
Blind
so
faith.
I think
Yep.
people, right. And so I think people who are heavily groomed by religion are more susceptible to wanting that type of authoritarian type of system. And not everybody. Like I said, my church just was a different thing. I don't know if I would have been pushed so far to deconstruct had I still remained in it. But I think the types of religions that are very much, intrusive into your lives, everything you do is for the church, and the music, you homeschool, whatever, like those types of things just kind of take over your mind, and that person is more susceptible to wanting a Trump figure, no matter what comes out of his mouth.
Anybody else?
So,
I mean, is this like a hint to what the possible next chapter of Deborah Grace's literary collection might be.
Oh, yes. I dive really heavy into the psychology of the scriptures and how the adherence to them affects the brain, it affects society. But it's a really bizarre need for an authoritative father figure, which is, if you dive into that rabbit hole in psychology, you're going to find a lot there. Scrupulosity, the fear of being sinful or dirty, sensationalism, wanting that those hits of dopamine and oxytocin. You want to feel connected to your fellow people, and this need that we have to be connected, to have a community, to have other people that are like, yeah, I know what you mean. Where this validation that just keeps happening within the circle. I was kicked off this live. I'm being persecuted. What? That's not persecution.
You muted me.
Saying.
You're persecuting me.
Right. That's not persecution. It's really bizarre how it has evolved, and I can say that many Trump supporters are Christians. Not all of them are. There are some very smart, wonderful Christians, whether it's out of ignorance or they're loosely basing their belief system off of the book. There's some really intelligent, wonderful Christians who are not Trump supporters. So we can't paint them all with a broad brush. There are some Democrats who are believers, who are like, yeah, I'm just going to go off of what I believe is the right thing to do. I want to be on the right side of history. I don't think that othering people is a good thing. I don't think that hating people who live an alternative lifestyle is a good thing. It's yes, Trump courted the evangelicals intentionally. But when you believe in something that's not proven, you're more likely to believe someone who isn't saying true things. When you believe that you are part of God's chosen people, his special fan club, that his apple of his eye, you want that same thing in reality. And if you believe that you're part of that special group, shall we say, then your validation to other people in real life is going to be that much more prevalent. And so you have a huge swath of people who are believers, who are Trump supporters, who are racist.
They literally built a golden idol of him, and were like kneeling and putting their hands on it. There's so much art.
They wrote a song about him being the chosen one.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a little culty just to say the least.
Not everyone, but the ones kneeling and touching the golden idol of Trump, maybe. The ones getting Trump tattooed to their forehead.
But I was just thinking about something like, you never hear any information about cults as far as like educating people on how to avoid being in one. And it always just kind of struck me, like I've always been fascinated by the idea of cults, and I never considered that I could have been in one, but it was just always something for me to, I always thought about it, and it just seems like something that we should teach people, you know, like the same way
Oh,
we
yeah.
raise awareness about cybersecurity so that we don't, you know, get a virus and all of this stuff. Like it should be a normal thing that we teach people to raise awareness. But it's just, you know, very suspect to me that it's never widely taught. It's like just kind of a Netflix documentary, or, you know, it's not like
Right.
taught in school, or, you know, parent, like I'm teaching my daughter, like, you know,
Yeah,
but it should
like
be
what
taught.
to look out for,
Right.
like signs of. They had,
Yeah,
like
because then
early propaganda of stuff like that.
exactly, because then it would start to point out the stuff that you see in regular churches, you know, so it just
Yeah.
like really shows the tie to that blurred line of church and state, how it's still playing a part in everything that we do, because, you know, it's certainly not in any curriculum, and if it did, people would have a whole fit. But it seems like a good idea to keep people from becoming the Mansons, or, you know, Heaven's Gate, or Jonestown. But, you
Yeah.
know, how it's never, you know, we are a hotbed in the U.S. for all these different cults, yet no one ever talks about it in any formal, like, curriculum. It's like just kind of stuff you hear about, but no one talks about it, like, formally, to really get people aware of it, because it would point at the regular churches.
True. Very true. Hey, you guys, we're going to be wrapping things up here. I'm going to talk to each of the guests real quick and Deborah to get some final thoughts. As we wrap up, please tap that screen to 35,000 likes for me. I still have a gift goal up there of some of the crowns, and I'm looking for a few more subbies. If you've enjoyed today's content, or you enjoy my weekly Bible study for non-believers, or when I do my open discussions, please consider subscribing. It's less than a cup of coffee a month, and I bring you great panels like you've seen today. So I really appreciate it if you'd consider subscribing. Before I end, what I always like to do is get some final thoughts from everybody. So I'm going to start with the panel first, and then I'm going to let Deborah give her final thoughts and do a little promotion for her book, so that all of you out there go out and get her book, because that's what we're here about today. So Tracy, did you have any final questions or final thoughts on today's discussions?
Well, I'm really excited to read your book, and I'm even more excited to read your second book when it comes out. So I'm not super equipped with more questions, but I love learning how you can use the Bible and you can use the truth of the history around it to prove it. I mean, I feel like that's something we weren't taught at all in church. I know I just assumed that pastors and elders were doing their full, like, social studies project for church every Sunday, and none of them do. They're just doing what we do. They're taking the word of someone else. And so I am very, very excited to have this book, not only to read, but to have as a resource to look back on too. So, yeah, thanks for having me up.
Thank you for being here, Tracy. Tracy Goes Live. I'm just going to promote you guys as I go around instead of having you do your promotion. Tracy Goes Live, and she does these wonderful lives where it's like, tell me why. And you can tell her why anything. Why the moon, has craters on it. Tell her why your job does a certain thing it does. Tell her anything. And she also does one that says, teach me how. And you can go up and teach her something. So if you like to get away sometimes from the deconstruction topics and stuff, and you need a little break, follow Tracy. She does amazing lives, and they're always a great time. Patrina, did you have any final thoughts or questions for Deborah?
Yeah, I'm going inside because it's raining out here, and I know you guys probably won't be able to hear me. Hold on one second.
All righty. You guys, tap the screen. We're almost at 35,000 likes. Thank you all for your gifts. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here today. We really appreciate each and every one of you.
So Deborah's book is on my next list of purchases. I'm excited to get it because the majority of the books, I've bought 13 books just this past year, have been by men authors. So I'm excited just to have a woman author and to get her side on, how she sees the Bible and how it's written and things. And so, yeah, I'm excited about it, and I appreciate you letting me be here today.
Well, I love having you up, Patrina. Patrina goes live with Jeff for Truth a lot. She's on lots of panels. She's amazing. She has a lot of knowledge. And so make sure you're following Patrina. Make sure you're following Jeff for Truth.
Too. Don't you, Patrina?
Yeah.
I've seen you live.
Yeah, I go live.
Patrina goes live, and she always has a wealth of information. So make sure you're following Patrina. Patrina, thank you as always for being here. Benny boy, do you have final questions or anything? And please ask as many as you want. It's okay. Like, I know you have good questions.
Well, not really many questions, just a lot of just good things to say. Like Deborah, every time I see you in a live or anytime, like I'm listening and I hear your voice, I'm learning something new. You when I know that Deborah's on a panel, you're gonna learn something new. And that's really the essence of this book. You could probably stop, I was in the middle of reading all these like kind of higher end, like scholarly books, and Deborah's book is right up to par with that, but also it's a page turner. I don't know how to, you don't want to put it down, where scholarly books kind of make me fall asleep sometimes. This one doesn't. And that's where I think it's a good starting place. It's also you're going to pick it up and you're going to find something you had no idea about. And just the way she looks at it will change the way you look at it. And I don't know, I can't say enough how much I appreciate this as a resource. And to anybody that has any doubts, read it. That's all I got to say.
I have to agree with you,
also,
because
check out my Discord.
Okay, yes. Check out his Discord. His link is in his bio. He's done an amazing job pulling the entire deconstruction community together. We're all in there, and it's a great place to get resources, information, hang out during lives. When you're watching a live, we chat in the lives, and you can use caps and you can cuss on the Discord, which you can't do here. So, so it's a fun place to hang out when people are live, like Joel or Justin or whoever. So come and hang out with us on Discord. But I have to agree with you. I went from, and this is no way to say anything disparaging for Jaron and Matthew's book, Christ Before Jesus, but that book was a heavy read. It was very informational. It was very scholarly, and it was because I have ADHD and stuff like that. So sometimes it was hard for me to stay focused on it because of those issues. But that's a me problem, not a them problem. It was so informative and had so much information that it was really hard sometimes for me to stay focused. But Deborah's book, the way she writes it, even though it is filled with information, filled with resources, and like she said, if you get the actual book, you're going to have tables and everything that you can go look at. Because she's taking you on her journey, it is a page turner. You just want to read the next thing.
It's not very long either. The Audible is only 4.5 hours, right? So it's not very long. The meat of the information is going to be in the tables. And that's why I try to warn people. But I do want to say the second book is scholarly. I try to make sure that it still is engaging and very informative and a page turner, but I stepped up my game. It's not going to be for everybody. You're going to glaze over paragraphs that are a little pedantic, but it was kind of necessary because it's more a call out to the mental health community.
I love it.
I think it's important. And I do like scholarly books, so I'm not telling y'all I don't like scholarly books. They're just harder for me to read personally because I have ADHD and what happened is I'll read the same thing over and over again because I'll realize, what did it just say? I have to read it again. And then I'll realize my mind wandered off in the same exact place it did 10 seconds ago. So I have to read it again. And I'm like, oh my God, why does it keep doing this? I think of the dog in Up where it's like squirrel. That's what my brain does while I'm trying to read scholarly books. Liz, how are you today?
Hey, good. How are you today, lady?
Doing good. Did you have any final thoughts or questions? And did you want to promote yourself?
Well, I am fairly new to the community, and I've been very thankful for all of the love I've received from everyone. I think this is the first time I've actually like talked to you versus just in comments and whatnot. So I don't really have a lot to add because I came in really late and didn't get to see a ton. I am excited to read the book or probably listen to it. Like I said in the comments, I do better listening sometimes while I'm cleaning and then referencing material later. But
well, if you get the Kindle version, you can, which has the tables, you can have Alexa read it out to you.
Oh, okay.
Some phones have an app that will read your Kindle versions to you.
Nice.
But then you also have the benefit of those tables.
Nice. Yeah, I was gonna say either way, I either get the audio plus the book for the tables so that I can reference it after or whatever. So what I think what I have to add is if there's anybody here listening that is kind of starting their deconstruction journey, that these are some amazing people to follow to learn more about it. And then once you kind of join their lives, see other people that are on, and everyone just kind of starts following everybody. It's a really, really welcoming community. So please don't be afraid to join and ask questions and be inquisitive. Just be respectful. And this is a great way to start. I don't do anything on my page to promote. I just watch everybody else. But I have had some ideas on things I might be able to bring to the community. So I might be working on some stuff in the future.
Well, I hope so. We love new creators. And if you ever want to come up on one of my panels, you're more than welcome to. I love having people join me and when I'm live because I don't like talking to myself. I really hate that feeling. I'm not good at that. I like having somebody up there to talk with me. But if you guys can, just give Liz a follow. Liz, if you are not a part of our Discord, you should join it. It is in Benny Boy's profile. Hi, Hood. Thank you for the gifts. But yeah, so Mother... I forgot Mother of Prep. Did you have any final thoughts and did you want to promote yourself?
Yeah, I just am grateful that I came on to your live today. I'm so glad that I got to encounter Deborah and hear about her book. And your hair looks great. I love the whole look. The Renaissance thing is totally cute. But I'm just so glad. I'm new to this community, so I haven't like gotten a lot of stuff. I'm trying to build followers, but I am particular because I've deconstructed completely, and it seems like everybody from my old church are the only ones who keep trying to request to follow me. So I made my account private because it's also family members too, and I haven't totally come out to everybody. So I'm like, I don't want to be talking to you guys. Like, you guys aren't on the same page. So I don't mind following or, accepting requests from strangers who are on that same journey because this is mainly where, like, my safe space for deconstructing. I'm also heavily involved in the Harris campaign, so you'll see a bunch of posts and stuff from that. I'm a volunteer. So,
awesome.
Yeah, I would love to at some point be able to host lives, but I have a ways to go. So if anyone wants to follow me, then shoot me a follow.
Sounds good. And Mother of Prep, if you're not a part of the Discord, like I said, check out Benny Boy's profile. We have a deconstruction Discord that has a bunch of great creators that are all linked together in there, and we'd love to have you be a part of our community. Deborah, the stage is yours. Why don't you wrap this up for us? Give us your final thoughts, anything you'd like to share about the book and promote the book. We'd love to hear from you.
She is on fire with her looks today, I have to say.
She is.
Thank you. I'm being very present. This is very cute and very demure.
Very mindful.
Very mindful. Sorry, I had to.
I'm glad you did. Somebody needed to say it.
No, so my book is available on Amazon in all the formats. I do want to reiterate that you don't get the benefit of the tables in the Audible version. There's apps, Alexa, that will read out the Kindle version to you, and you have the tables. You can reference them. If you are a believer here listening by chance, I invite you to buy the book. If you find that I am wrong and can prove it, write your own dissertation and I will remove my book from Amazon. I have been giving that challenge for a couple of years now. I stand by it. And I think it's important. This is why my face is in the book. This is why Deborah is my name, right? There I am in all my glory. And I felt it was necessary. I just want to echo what Katrina said. And there are so many male voices in the atheist community. And I had so much knowledge in reverse engineering these apologist arguments. It was a good way to add some female voices to the stage and say, hey, guess what? I'm strong enough. I have enough information. Just because what's between my legs doesn't diminish my ability to comprehend information. And so let's encourage other women to get their voices out there to say, like, hey, you know what? I don't believe in this bullshit anymore. And I don't have to be oppressed by this bullshit anymore. And so I wanted to be kind of I know I'm not the first person, but I wanted to add to the collective voices to say, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. This is not really good for humanity. It's not good for society. So go get it. Go get the book. Share it with your friends. If you're done with it, leave it in a public library, one of those library share mailboxes on the East Coast. Leave it in your hairdresser's office. Leave it on a coffee table in a doctor's office for other people to read, so that maybe it gets out there. If you feel so inclined to do so.
I might have to do that with like 50 copies.
Anonymously give them to family members who are on the fence or who have been, trying to drive this into, get you back into churches or whatever. That's just a thought.
The holidays are coming up. I'm sure it would look real nice with a pretty bow on top.
Wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it be great for Christmas to give this book out?
Right?
Deborah, I want to thank you so much for being here. You're amazing. I love you. Deborah is live often in the evening. Okay, I'll just tell you that much. So if you want some great evening creator content, you want to follow Deborah. She is brilliant. And if you see her on a panel, watch the live, whatever panel she's on, because she's going to bring you great information. You'll never be disappointed. She's amazing. And she's way, way calmer than I am. Okay. We're on the same panel. I'm the one losing my shit and she's the one bringing it back down. Okay. But she's amazing. I want to thank you all for being here today. This has been an amazing live. Go get the book. I've been telling you that for a while now, people. You will not be disappointed. Thank you once again. We'll see you around the TikTok street. Oh, what?
Before we end, can we all just give Crystal thank you, a big thank you, Crystal, for having these lives, not just the book club lives, but the Bible study is amazing. She's on doing Bible studies every Wednesday. What time do you start? It's
11 a.m. Pacific time.
11 a.m. Pacific time. Get in there, guys. It is awesome. It is like my favorite thing ever. And Deborah has joined us there. She's going to teach you something. You're going to learn so much. And Crystal brings it all together. And I don't know. It's just
I'm just trying to bring some education. Sometimes we get into the debates and the heatedness of it all and stuff like that. But some of us want to be as educated as Deborah and Justin and Thinker and Bash. And there's only one way to do that, and that is to provide educational creative, lives. So that's
You're
what I'm going
fostering
for
that.
with the Bible study, with the book club, and when I do my conversations, I try to let us hear the Christians, not just yell at them. So thank you for recognizing that, Benny. I love you all. I will see you on the mean streets of TikTok. Bye, everybody.
Bye.